Shirley Dawn Shilvock, the 15th of May 1932 I was born. Hosier Glenn Percival, he and his wife migrated to Australia, and he got lots of land and did really well. He was a councillor in Gympie, and he owned the property that my father eventually bought off him, that was on the Mary River and Widgie Creek at Gympie, just outside of Gympie. It was a beautiful property, and I was brought up there. And Hosier Glenn Percival came to Maryborough, and he owned houses in Maryborough too. He did very well. When we lived at on the farm, it was 3.5 miles to go to school, and we had to walk all the way there and home. And often we never got there till little lunch, and I only went to school till grade 6 because we had to work on the farm, and we had to milk before we went to school. That's why we were so late getting to school often. It was a bit of a tough life, but we were determined to get on in life, so I guess it didn't hurt us. When I was at the farm, my father tried, we were very poor like a lot of people in that era, but my father did eventually get horses for us, and that was Mischief, that photo, and she was ours to ride to school. That was the last about 18 months of school. And my older brother said he thought it was fair if my brother and I doubled up to the front gate, and he galloped all the way to school and we walked all the way to school, and the same thing happened on the way home. I think we were younger, so we were quite happy with the setup, I think. I had another horse that my father specially got for me, was Pandora, and she was beautiful. She was tall and bay, and yeah, she was a really nice. Mischief was Mischief. That was what she was. She was a mischief. Cliff, my older brother, he was very good at school, and he did chemistry. He was a chemist. And then there was Graham, who was a farmer, and Arthur, Barry and Wayne. Wayne was about 15 years younger than me, and I used to look after him, and people thought he was my baby because I often had him and was looking after him. My mother was a very good student at school, I know, and the teachers wanted her to go on, but her parents were poor, so she used to do lots of house duties and that, I think, for people in those days. And she had Cliff before she was married, and my father advertised for a housekeeper. He was on a property at Imble, so she went and he accepted Cliff, and she sort of worked there. Yeah, I think she was very brave to do that way back then, because most of the babies were adopted out. And they didn't get any help from the government whatsoever, so it would have been very, very hard for them. Cliff was a chemist, and he was up in Darwin, and he suicided in a car accident, yeah, in a car. We were living in Mergen, and he had a plane, and he used to drive a plane, and he'd come and circle around before he landed so that we knew he was coming. He was very clever, Cliff. Well, when my father was young, my grandfather had a property up Chatsworth way, out from Chatsworth, which is just out of Gympie. And he and his wife went into town and they left my father there, who was only 16, and his sister and the other younger children, they left them at home. And people came and were throwing things on the roof and threatening to come and get them and everything. So my father knew where the guns were, so he went and got a gun to frighten the person. And his sister had a boyfriend, and he could hear the noise going on from over at his place, which was a long way away. He could hear that there was trouble, and he came over to help, and my father accidentally shot him. And by the time they got him into hospital and that, he had died, but he was never charged because of the circumstances. So that was a terrible thing that happened in his life. And he was an alcoholic, and I think maybe people do this to block things out in their life. But he was a very, very hard worker, and he used to go and ring bark and poison, you know, all the rubbish on the property for years and years and years. He'd get up and milk in the morning and then go and do that and then come home and milk at night. He used to plough with draft horses and ploughs, and he always had something nice for us to eat, like beautiful big tomatoes. The watermelons he grew, I've never seen watermelons like it since. And they were huge, the long green ones, and we had the army camping outside of our property, and they found out we had watermelons. 2 shillings in those days it was, wasn't it? They'd come and give Dad 2 shillings and he'd let them go and help themselves. And people said, "Aren't you afraid that they'll take more?" He said, "They can't carry more than one. I don't mind if they eat one while they're there." They were the most beautiful watermelons. So the army used to come and get lots of watermelons from our place. And another thing that used to happen, it was when the Big Depression was on, and the swagmen used to come in, and we always gave them a meal. We never ever knocked them back. And sometimes they would come and just chop a bit of wood, but we always gave them a meal. And one day my parents were away, and when they got home there was a note to say, "Had a feed and gone." They'd just come and help themselves. But my parents were very generous like that. When we were on the farm, my father got double pneumonia. And he wasn't able to work, so we had to put half-share family on for a time. And we went in and lived in Gympie. It was a big old house, and it had a little house on top of it that you could climb up and walk around. And it was a lovely old Queenslander. And we went to the 1 mile school. And I can remember the children there, some of them, had always had fruit with their lunch. But we sort of didn't. I didn't. And one day I thought, I just love something, so I took an orange out of a girl's bag to have. And, of course, she complained to the teachers. And the teacher, they all knew immediately who'd taken it. And but the teachers were absolutely lovely to me. They took me up inside and they said, we've got a cupboard here that's got fruit in, and if ever you want fruit, you come up and ask us. And of course I was too shy to do that. But I thought it was so lovely of them, and I think that made a big difference in my life with them being so nice to me. I'll never forget that. And then, as my father got well, he built a big Queenslander out on our farm, and we moved out there, and we went to the Lower Wonga school then. As I said, we walked 3.5 miles there and back most days until we got a horse that we shared. And the children, some of them could be really horrible to you. I had my good friends, and some of them went nursing with me. 2 of my girlfriends went nursing with me, but some of them would tease you and say they could see your pants through your dress, or you didn't have any shoes on, or, you know, be really horrible to you, and made you feel terrible. And I did grow up with an inferiority complex, as a lot of children in our age group did, but I overcame that as I got older, and I thought, you know, I'm as good as anybody, so nobody's going to treat me like that ever again. And I was determined to get on in life. Pat Weedman was our teacher, and he said that the Percival children will never amount to anything. And I'll tell you what, we would have all surprised him with how we got on with our lives. But he would get me out at the board to do algebra, and he would bash me hard in the middle of the back, just about knock me over so many times. And to this day, I still don't know how to do algebra. I'm sure if he'd have taken a gentler approach, I would have understood it. Every year, I used to ask my father of things that I'd like at Christmas, and I really wanted to learn the piano, and I wanted a pair of shoes. And he said, at Christmas, lovey, at Christmas. Christmas had come and it wouldn't be there, and I'd cry every Christmas. And because we never got much, but I didn't understand how poor we were in those days. But then I was good at writing at school, and my father offered me £5, which was a lot of money then, if I could get 10 for a composition. And I used to get 9, 9.5, 9, 9.5. And I started with a big pad that was about a 30-page pad, and I ripped out so many pages. It had about 10 pages left in it because I'd start, and I wasn't satisfied, and I'd tear it out. And the teacher said he never believed in giving 10 because he always believed in leaving room for improvement. But I did get 10, and I got £5 that I spent on a pair of shoes and a little jewellery box. And my father was really, really happy that I'd got 10. He was really excited. I used to be a good writer, but I've got a bit scratchy lately.
So
we used to have sports day at school once a year, and I was a very good runner. And of course there was threepence there for the winner, and threepence was a big thing in those days. So I used to always win, and the teachers used to handicap me, and I still won, and they'd say, "Not Percival again." But I probably had in mind that there was threepence there at the end of it, so it was worth running for. Well, I can say we never got much for Christmas, ever, but one year I did get a doll. I had one doll, and I was really proud of her, and she went missing, and I couldn't find her anywhere. And I climbed up on top of the old dresses that we used to have, and she was up there all smashed up. My brothers had got her and smashed her up. So I always had a longing to have dolls after that. The boys used to often play up, so my father would sit there with the stock whip at the head of the table, and if they'd played up, he'd flick them with it. But luckily, I was usually well behaved and I never copped it once. But they got it several times and got sent from the table. On the farm, I always thought it was so much hard work and always busy, and I always had a longing to sort of do something else. And I thought I'd like to go nursing. And two of my girlfriends that I nursed with, that I went to school with, went nursing with me. So I trained at the Gympie Hospital, and I really loved it. And I thought, this is amazing. You don't have to work morning and night and in between, and you have days off. I just couldn't believe it because we used to work so hard on the farm. So I finished my training at the Gympie Hospital, general training, and I applied to do midwifery at the Royal Women's in Melbourne. And one of my girlfriends, Carmel Conway, was coming with me. But unfortunately, she got TB and wasn't able to come. So I went down there by myself, which is a big thing for me because I'd never even been as far as Brisbane prior to that. And I got down there, and this hospital took up a whole block. And I walked around and I thought, oh, where do I go in? But I eventually got in, and then when I looked, I thought, how will I ever find my way around here? It is so big, and I was just overcome, really. But anyway, I did. I trained, and I really enjoyed it. I didn't make any really lasting friends down there because I was only down there for a year, and I can remember one day when we were in labour ward, we had to do 10 deliveries, witness 10 deliveries before we could do a delivery, and then we had to do at least 20 deliveries, and a lot of us did a lot more. But you'd be in the labour ward cleaning up and working, and one of the sisters there was Pernell, and she used to give us a hard time, and she'd scream out, "Percival, scrub!" And I'd think, oh, goodness. So you'd have to go and scrub to do a delivery. And she'd unnerve you, really. And there was another one, Sister Cairns Hill, who was the most gentlest, loveliest little sister, and we were always happy when she was on. So anyway, we did all that, and when we were on night duty, we used to catch a tram out to Kew, and we used to stay at Tara House, which is the nicest house I have ever lived in or ever been in. And I lived in it, and it was absolutely beautiful. And we'd catch the tram out there, stay out there for the day, and then catch the tram back into the Women's Hospital for night duty. And when you walked out of Tara House, you just felt like the Queen because it was so magnificent a building and so beautiful. And while I was in Melbourne, the Queen and Prince Philip had their first visit to Melbourne. And we used to all rush out the front of the hospital when they went past if we were off duty, and we'd go everywhere when we were off duty to see them. And we had to form a queue at Government House when the Queen planted a tree. She planted it about 3 foot from where I was standing. And I just was amazed at her beautiful peaches and cream complexion and how beautiful it was. And I just was astounded. And I felt so good that I was there so close to her. And all the children, when they went by, used to scream out for Philip. Philip, Philip, they used to say. But we were more interested in seeing the Queen. When I finished med in Melbourne, I applied to do work with the grey nurses who travelled from home to home in Melbourne to help people. But in the meantime, my brother was a chemist out in Springsure, and he sent me a telegram and said, "Come immediately, position awaiting you." So I decided to go out to Springsure. And when I got out there, there was this little old hospital and only one trained nurse who was the matron. And they used to do surgery, deliver babies and all that sort of thing. The other nurses that were there were only aides. So, and some of them were, a couple of them were from England. And some of those English nurses can be pretty bossy. And I can remember the matron went on long service and I had to take over, and I was the only trained nurse there. And one day we had this man, I can remember his name, Mr. Ryan, and he needed immediate surgery. So I went and asked the staff if any of them were prepared to come in and help. And they said, "You can go to B hell." And I said, "How would you feel if that was your father?" So the secretary was applying for new staff. So I went down to him and I said, "State that they must be prepared to do surgery if necessary." I said, "because the ones you've got won't." Well, we did operate. The doctor's wife came in and assisted, and she wasn't even a nurse. There was the doctor's wife and I and the doctor, and we did the surgery. And Mr. Ryan came out all right too. He had to be on lots of drips and everything, but we kept a good eye on him, and he ended up all right. And we used to do deliveries and caesareans and all that sort of thing. And there was twins were born, and they were very small. And this was after the matron came back. And she said I could look after one and she'd look after the other. So I tube fed my baby because we were taught in Melbourne how to tube feed. Melbourne was a very good training hospital. And she bottle fed her baby. And when they're tiny like that, they get exhausted if they're bottle fed because it's too much for them. So mine gained weight beautifully and hers lost weight drastically. And she came and said to me, would I show her how to tube feed her baby? which I did, and it came on after that. But if it hadn't have been tube fed, it wouldn't have lived. And yeah, it was a good experience out there. But some of those English nurses tried to boss you around, and there's no way I'd be bossed around in those days. I met Bill in Springsure, and I thought he was the best person I'd ever met. I just thought he was so kind and generous and so nice. So we got engaged and eventually got married. And once you were married then, you weren't employed anymore. So they lost a lot of good nurses because they never employed them once they were married. Anyway, I had 4 girls, and then one of the ladies I knew worked with the Blue Nurses. Her daughter used to do speech and drama, as my girls did, and she said, "Oh, we have trouble getting staff. Would you be prepared to come and work with the Blue Nurses?" And I said, "Oh yeah." And Kathy was only very young. And they'd say, "How long?" They'd ring me up and say, "Can you come today? How long will it take you to get ready?" I said, "As soon as I can get Kathy dressed and organised and in the child care centre, I'll be right." So that's how I started Blue Nursing. And I really enjoyed it. And I worked there for nearly 30 years. And I loved it. I didn't want to leave. But I thought, if I don't leave, I won't have time to do anything else. I worked until I was 68 with the Blue Nurses. And I loved it. I loved the staff were just amazing. They were a wonderful group I worked with. And we still go out to morning teas once a month. They were just amazing because I was pretty low at that stage because things had happened in my life that weren't good in regards to my husband, and I was probably as low as I could get. But they knew that I was capable of nursing and doing a good job, and they encouraged me, and they just were a wonderful group. And I don't know where I'd be today if it wasn't for them. Bill worked at Phillip Motors in Melbourne, and he was offered a new garage that was set up in Maryborough, a mobile garage. He was offered that to manage. So we came over, and I only had, Vicky and Julie were only young at that time, so we came over and he took over Newtown Mobile Service Centre. And I used to go up and help, and he was very good mechanic and well known and well liked in Maryborough. And if people had a car that they couldn't work out what was wrong, people would say, "Take it to Bill Shilvock. He only has to listen to the motor and he'll know." And Bill was brilliant, he really was. And he managed the service station for about 30 years. And when he retired, he sold it, and the people that bought it had it done up for a while, and then it sort of burnt down. When Bill retired, he went out. He liked a little property I've got out at Tyro, and he went out and lived out there most of the time, out at Timboto. And he loved doing things out there, and he loved working the land and working with the horses, and he just really enjoyed it. And then he got very sick, and he ended up passing away. And everything out there misses him. The horses miss him. The little cottage misses him. Everything misses him because he was so good out there. And we all miss him too. Even though, you know, things happened in our life, we still miss him. I used to collect a few dolls and a few bits and pieces when I was working. I used to go to the auctions if I was off, and I used to bid on things, and I used to get things. And one day my mother said to me, "What are you going to do with all that?" And I said, "One day, Mum, I'd like to do something special with it." And then I had the chance of buying part of a collection, and it just grew from there. What I've got in this museum, I've got some amazing dolls and toys in this museum, and I got quite a lot of stuff at Desley Maitland's auction, and some of it is outstanding. I've got lots of French and German dolls. I've got a Holden pedal car that was made in 1944, prior to the Holden car. There's lots of interesting things in here. And I just look at it and I get quite amazed myself at times that I've done this. But then a lot of people don't know what's here, and they probably never will because they're not interested in coming and having a look. So it's a bit sad, but that's life. Lessons from life. Determination is a wonderful thing if it's used in the right avenues. If I hadn't been determined, I'd have never got where I am today. No chance. Now, I just think I've been fortunate in life that I haven't had a lot of illness, and that I can continue on as I am. So, God willing, it'll continue.